University of California, Irvine. So in total, it took about 8 years to get my undergraduate degree, sort of working and balancing home life and whatnot. And I got a very excellent education at both places, where I had professors who knew who I was, who tried to mentor me. At Boise State, I would say they weren't always successful at getting me to stay in school, for example. But I felt guided. And eventually, when I was at the University of California at Irvine, I met a professor who so inspired me that I decided I would shift my goal from being a lawyer to being a legal historian. And she helped me through that process. She got me to apply to a number of graduate schools. I got into Yale University. And then later I got my law degree at Duke University School of Law. So I was very fortunate to have a great public education and also later on then a great private education.
I also went to a public state school, but it was the University of Michigan. And I wanted to be a lawyer when I started also, but then I became interested in philosophy, and I had very small classes, and it was a very sort of tight-knit department. And then I decided to go on to graduate school in history, actually, and went to Columbia University. So I've also experienced both the public and the private, but Michigan was fabulous. It was, just so many opportunities, and I mean, it was a great state school.
Now, can you talk a little bit about this Connecticut public university system? And we hear about UConn, and we hear about the other state universities. And I don't know if people know how they're organized or what the purpose is of them, but maybe speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So the University of Connecticut is run by a board of trustees, and it's what's called a Research One university. So the professors there will teach perhaps 2 courses a semester, sometimes 1 course and then 2 courses the next semester. And their primary responsibility is research, and then teaching is part of it, and then a very small service component. The state universities, Central, Southern, Western, and Eastern, are under a board of regents that, and so a separate system from UConn. And we have a lot more focus on teaching. So we teach 4 courses per semester. We do have a research component, but we're not expected to do as much research as a UConn professor. And then we have a very large service component as well. So
which basically means committee work, a lot of committee work helping to run the university.
Right. And some of that service is spent one-on-one with students, so advising, working with students in terms of, the history club and things like that, or university clubs. But some of it also is serving on a curriculum committee, for example, or serving on the university senate.
Now, so it sounds as though your students are much more likely to have a lot of interaction with the professors at Eastern or Central.
And that's why a lot of students come to the state schools, because we've heard that at UConn they don't get as much attention from the professors. The professors aren't there all the time, but we're always there, always available. So we have much more one-on-one with students.
Yep. And one of the nice things is that because we teach 4 courses a semester, which is a lot, but the course numbers are capped. So we normally would not teach over 40 students in a 100 or 200 level class. And then in the upper divisions, we might teach 25 students, or in a seminar, 15 students. So
if it's very writing intensive.
At the beginning of the semester, I memorize all my students' names. I know their names. Now, I may not know a lot about them in the first 2 weeks, but but eventually I will know quite a bit about them. And in a UConn class, and this was the same way at UC Irvine when I attended there, we might have 300 people in a lecture hall, and my interaction then would be with a teaching assistant. We don't have teaching assistants.
It's all you.
It's all us. Yep.
I'm thinking from the point of view of a student experience too, for someone who's coming from high school, who might not have a family tradition of everyone going to college, it's probably a more similar experience having 25 to 40 fellow students rather than 250 or more.
Yeah, I was a first generation college student, and I didn't know how financial aid worked. I didn't know what I was supposed to do in a college class exactly. And the fact that I started at Boise State, which is very similar to Central Connecticut State, meant that I had teachers who could walk me through things. And if I was having a personal crisis, I could go to them, and they knew who I was, and they would try to help me.
Now, so what's happening now? I know I as far back as about last March, I think, I started hearing rumblings about things that were going on, changes that were being proposed for the system. And some of the changes were not just disturbing, but they seemed to parallel some changes that we've been seeing in the kindergarten through 12th grade system in Connecticut. So maybe let people know what's happening, at least from the professor's point of view to start with.
Well, a few years ago, they decided to merge the Connecticut State universities with the community colleges to create one big system with one board of regents. And they claimed they were doing that in order to save money or to be more efficient. And it turned out to actually cost a lot more money, and there's a whole long history of sort of missteps with that whole system. But recently what's happened is our faculty union, the American Association of University Professors, has a contract that is being negotiated. So we just got contract proposals last month from the Board of Regents that we find very disturbing. We believe that they are trying to change the entire university system. Now, this contract is just for the 4 state schools, for Southern, Eastern, Central, and Western. They're going to be negotiating a contract with the community colleges, so that's separate. But we feel that the contract is fundamentally changing the university education that can be offered.
So it isn't just a matter of paying a bigger share of health insurance or
no, we're not
thing?
negotiating. We haven't started talking about money at all, and the health insurance and pensions are not negotiated. They're negotiated by CBAC, the State Employees Union. So this has nothing to do with money. There's no money for faculty members on the table. Now, the Board of Regents say they are going to save money by doing this, but it has nothing to do with our salaries or benefits or anything.
Normally, when you're in bargaining, you come with your chips, they come with their chips.
Right.
You trade a few things. We came with our chips, and they came with a howitzer. They were on a totally different. They're bringing a different thing to the table, and what they're talking about is changing the nature of what it will mean to have an education at a CSU, what that education will be. And I'll let Louise talk about some of the contract.
Some of the things that disturb us the most is they are trying to make it easier to fire faculty members, particularly full-time faculty members with tenure. Up till now, the contract says that the university has to prove financial exigency to fire faculty members with tenure unless the faculty member has done something wrong, and there is a process, a disciplinary process. So the myth that you can't get fired if you have tenure is not true. If you do something wrong, there are very complex disciplinary procedures that have to be followed, but you certainly can get terminated, and people have been terminated for doing bad things. But this is it's not about discipline, it's about just being able, the contract, their proposals say that if the Board of Regents believes that there are financial or programmatic reasons, they can terminate faculty who have tenure. So they can just say, we're losing a little bit money now, we think your program's no good, off you go. So that means there's no job security. They also propose that they can move faculty members from one school to another school if they feel it's necessary. So I could be teaching at Central today in New Britain, and next year I will have to be driving an hour to Willimantic to be at Eastern. And what disturbs us a lot about this is not just its impact on the faculty, because obviously it's, you don't want to be fired, you don't want to be moved, but it's really the impact on the students, because our students, are not very privileged. They need extra attention, and they develop a relationship with a faculty member. And if that faculty member just disappears, they're like lost if you have a student. How are we going to write letters of recommendations for them if they graduate and they want to get a job somewhere else and I'm gone? So that's problematic. They also want to be able to increase class sizes for economic reasons. Right now, our contract says that they can only be, their class sizes are determined for programmatic reasons, so for educationally sound principles. So if you have a really writing intensive class where you have to have a lot of special attention, that class is going to be smaller than a sort of survey where it's not intensive. But now they just want to be able to increase the size of the classes if they're, need a little bit of extra money.
So it sounds pretty explicit that money is being placed above student needs.
Yes, and they haven't told us how much money they're going to save. There's no, spreadsheet of we're saving this amount here and this amount there. They just want the option at some point in the future if they feel like saving money.
It's also sort of saving money because what they imagine is that these 4 universities are one thing, and we think of our university as its own thing,
right.
And there are 3 other universities. So trading me to Danbury, it's not,
right.
That's a totally different team.
Well, I did go to Eastern for a couple years in the 80s, and Central has a very different feel to it from Eastern.
It does.
It does. But there has been talk about saving money by not having duplicate programs at the 4 schools. So if there's not enough music majors at Central, you close the music program at Central, and everybody goes and does music at Eastern. The problem with that is our students are often full-time students. They have full-time jobs. They live near New Britain. So are they supposed to travel an hour to take their music class?
Right. It also assumes that all you do is your major. And of course, we know that's not true, right? You do your general education, you do a minor, you have electives. It's not just your major. That's an issue.
And I think we should talk about the importance of general education as part of the university experience. What do people want out of going to college? And I imagine it isn't just training for one job that may or may not be there when you graduate.
Right, and that's what we're afraid about, is that they can say, oh, these are the jobs that we want students to have, so we're going to close down all the programs and don't train them for those jobs, which gives them a very narrow education, and maybe 5 years from now, those jobs aren't the jobs that are, out there.
Right, and let me say that I think history is probably a pretty secure discipline when it comes to general education, right? Not that everyone necessarily always has to take a history class, but there's going to be history in a university, there's going to be English in a university, or you really can't call it a university.
Right.
But I think sometimes students don't even know what they're going to need in the future or what's going to be valuable to them in a particular setting. When I started at Boise State, what I wanted to do was get done, because I knew that I had a finite amount of money and I had a husband, and we had to, I needed to get finished. And of course, I didn't finish fast enough and I had to drop out. And so things like general education could really seem to be in the way, right? Now, what I need to do is plow through my major, right. And I need, why do I have to take sociology, and why do I have to take biology and all of that kind of stuff? It turns out later in life, you're really glad you took those things. I'm really glad that I learned about biology. It helps me understand all kinds of things in the world I wouldn't otherwise. And I'm glad that I took mathematics, and I even went on in mathematics. I thought of changing my major to mathematics, even though I loved history. You spend a lot of time exploring. But if you take students who are first-generation college students, their parents don't know how to advise them necessarily, and you say to them, well, you could get done in 3 years if you just took job training, they might say, yeah, sure, give it to me, right?
Especially since the cost is going
Right.
ever higher for students.
Right.
Right.
And they won't understand that what's being given to them is something less
Right.
less than a university education ought to be.
You know, and I want to challenge people who are watching out there who are adults. How many people have really stayed in a single career
Right.
track from age, mid-20s to mid-60s?
And I think that employers want well-educated employees. I mean, they want people who can read and write and think critically and be creative. And you get that from, a real university education. And I think that everyone is talking about, STEM or job training, and that, they've identified these certain jobs, and I'm not really sure that that's where the jobs are. I think
Sure.
people with liberal arts educations can get jobs.
Well, I have friends who are medical doctors, and the one, all he does is read history. Also my father-in-law was a rocket scientist. He made airplanes and designed airplanes. He graduated from RPI, just like the chair of our board of regents.
Yes.
And but later in life, when he retired, he became an artist. These were things that can be fostered. Your people are multi-talented. They don't just do one thing. And your university education may not be used only in your career. It's used in life to raise your kids, to make friends.
The thing that bothers us a lot is that these are working class, middle class kids, and they deserve the opportunities that richer people have. And our universities are very good right now, and they're getting those opportunities. And we just don't want them to take them away from our students by focusing on narrow job training and just trying to save money. And I mean, the amount of money that the state has been giving to public higher education has been decreasing, as the decades go on. And they're not giving very much public higher education. I think about 11% of the budget goes to higher education, and the state is only paying 30% of what it costs to run our university. The rest is paid in tuition, and that's because the state is. It's not because, costs probably are going up, but that's not really why tuition's going up. It's because the state is contributing less. And I just think it's really unfair to the working people of Connecticut that they don't have the opportunity to give their children the kind of education that, people in private schools get.
And when you look at, just say one of the proposals, right, which is this moving professors around. So take away even the fact that it's very destabilizing, like for us to have to move around like that. When you build a department, you're choosing professors that have different fields, but perhaps complementary interests and visions, right?
Sure, that's like any team, really.
Right.
You want
Right.
people who have
work together.
bring different
Building a
skill
team.
sets. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. We're not interchangeable parts. When you build that department, you're building something that students can then say, well, I really like the history department at Central, or I really like the art department at Central, and I want to go there to this school. When rich students shop for colleges, right? When they go around to Smith and Williams and Yale and Harvard, they're going and they say, well, I want to look at the professors who are teaching here, and I want to look at the facilities they have here. And they choose based on this combination of things. But if we're interchangeable, and we can go anywhere at any time, you build no departments, you build no solidarity. There's nothing for students to choose, they just come there. There's no vision that you're building university-wide. And it would be very destabilizing for the students in the university.
And one of the other contract proposals is to increase the percentage of part-time faculty. And we have really good part-time faculty, certainly in our department, but throughout the universities we work at. The problem with part-time faculty is that they're not paid very well, and they're part-time, so they have to have more than one job. So they might teach 2 classes for us, and they'll be teaching 2 classes somewhere else, and they have to travel maybe an hour to get to their other classes. They simply cannot be at the university to pay attention to the students the way the full-time people can. And just talking about destabilization, it's just, they're coming and going, and they won't necessarily get hired the next semester. I mean, we've had to cut some part-time job, because that's how they save money, is cut the part-timers. So student gets to know somebody who's a part-time faculty member, they could be gone.
And of course, if they're likely to find, if they're good, to find a better opportunity somewhere else.
Right, and then, so you had a great professor, you want to get a letter of recommendation to go to law school, and the person's gone. Right. And that's not fair either.
Yep.
Now, academic freedom is a big issue.
Yes.
It's been in the news in positive and negative lights lately. From a teacher point of view, what's the need for academic freedom?
Well, I can do it.
Basically, we're research professors, right? We do research and then we bring that into the classroom. Sometimes we do controversial things, right? There are many things that need to be explored in this world that are unsettling or disturbing in one way or another. I'm working right now on a book about suicide, which is a pretty uncomfortable and often controversial topic. And when you bring things into the classroom, people can get upset, right? Or you order certain books for the library and people are upset about that. You have to protect it, because what you're protecting is inquiry. You're protecting the right of people to engage in study and raise uncomfortable issues, no matter what the political climate is, no matter what changes might take place in the government, or no matter what student might be sitting in front of you at a particular time.
And that's where tenure comes in, because with tenure, we are reviewed every 6 years. So we have reviews, they monitor our teaching, they see if we're doing publications. I mean, having tenure doesn't mean you don't do anything. And if you don't do anything, then you can trigger the disciplinary process. So, but unless you do something that triggers the disciplinary process, they cannot fire me for saying something that's controversial. And the thing I bring up is the issue of climate change. There are people politically who don't want to admit that climate change exists. And there have been efforts to fire faculty members who are working on climate change, for scientists who are studying what is happening to the planet. Mm-hmm. And if we allow political opinions to fire people who are working on this kind of science, I mean, what is going to happen to the planet? We're not going to stop climate change. So, I mean, that's like one of the more extreme issues of that, but it is going on. So having tenure means I can teach climate change. I can research climate change. If I do something wrong and the disciplinary process starts, well, then you can get rid of me. But until that happens, I'm free to study what I think is the truth.
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but when you were talking, I was wondering, as the state reduces the share of the cost of maintaining the system, is private money coming in, number one? And if private money is coming in, how does it impact academic freedom?
Well, if you only can get the money that is going to fund certain projects, it's going to affect academic freedom. And they want us they keep talking, be entrepreneurial, try to get outside people to give you money to run certain programs. If the only people who have the outside money are the wealthy people who don't want you to talk about climate change, then it is going to affect sort of the production of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And it is a public good to have a state university system that protects academic freedom and that teaches students the most up-to-date science and knowledge.
Right, and I mean, we still teach courses, so we teach courses like the United States from, 1492 to 1877. We teach survey courses. if you were reliant on outside money, they could say, well, we really only want you to teach the 20th century because that's really all that matters
Right.
for our workforce. And direct you in certain ways.
Or they might make you use a certain textbook that has a certain political opinion that, you know.
Right. And they'll do it by incentives, not demand necessarily, but incentives. Well, if you use our textbook, we'll give it free to the students.
Right.
Or we'll donate so much for a professor for 20th century history, but we won't
Right.
donate for other uses in the history department.
And that's a trend that we're worried about also, is this sort of corporatization of the university, where large corporations give you the content, sell the university the content that the faculty member has to use so that they can make money from this outside content provider. And the university could save a lot of money if they bought the content from an outside provider and just had tutors teaching this content, and you could get rid of all the tenured faculty, but then you're not producing any knowledge.
Textbook companies in the United States, there are only really a few textbook companies anymore, and they control a lot of that content. And they will produce a textbook, and then they'll get a famous, like in our discipline, history, they'll get a famous historian to give lectures that students can listen to, and they'll have a test bank that you can use, and they'll have PowerPoints you can use. And there's a lot of money to be made in this. Every student will tell you the cost of textbooks is exploding, but it's because they've started appending all these things to the textbooks. And essentially, we could be teaching assistants.
Right, and then we can put everything online, and then students can sit by themselves in a room listening to some lecture. Now, that's not the way we teach at our university right now. We have on-ground classes with lots of student interaction, and students interact with each other and with us, and
they can talk to us, they can ask
Yes.
us any question they want, either in class or in our office hours.
And we're worried that they're going to try to do that to our system in order to save money, because the state won't give any money.
But it won't be in education.
Well, I have to tell you that just the fact that the term content provider has entered our vocabulary
It's a little scary.
it is scary, and it's
Yes.
not just the case in higher education. I think in certainly K through 12, there's been almost a parallel attempt to deprofessionalize
Yes.
the profession of teaching.
Well, you remember when back in the 80s when the medical profession went to sort of HMOs, right? And everybody became a healthcare provider. So you're a CNA, you're a healthcare provider. You're an MD, you're a healthcare provider. You're a midwife or a nurse, you're a healthcare provider, right? All of that. I think that's starting to happen with education. Now, if you thought the doctor-patient relationship was a special one, and now you've seen it become healthcare provider and healthcare consumer.
Right.
Well, this is what's happening. The student-teacher relationship is like no other. It is like no other. But it can be, what they want to reduce it to is content consumer, content creator. In between, there might be a content provider or a content coordinator.
Right.
Right? That's not a relationship. Well, what's next? The parent-child relationship? Are they going to start reducing that to the,
And part of the reason we're worried about this is that the chairman of our Board of Regents has one of these companies. It's called Node.
KNOD.
Which is based out of Malaysia, where people do, it basically that way. So we don't know if he's planning to do that to our system. Nobody will tell us, but we are just a little suspicious by these contract proposals that have never, in 30 years that we've had a contract, have they ever proposed things like this. This is not like, you're going to make less money, or, there's going to be some rules that are changed.
We're going to add 5 students to your classroom.
Yeah, I mean, this is like totally changing the whole way the university works.
Now, this seems to me really, it should be obvious that it sounds really crooked if a person entrusted with a public system owns a company.
Well, he doesn't own it. He consults for it.
Oh,
he
okay.
consults
Is
for
connected
it.
with a
Right.
company
And he also
that could stand to benefit. That's sort of a classic conflict of interest, no?
Well, I don't
Or
know.
not?
Because many of these things, so like our our Board of Regents, now this is a voluntary board, right? They're appointed by the governor. They are essentially volunteers.
Yeah.
As are all these boards of trustees. Same with the UConn system. I would say it's at least uncomfortable, right? He also has interests in Newmont University, which is basically it's been nicknamed Software U, and he advises there. And for example, the Board of Regents also hired the Boston Consulting Group. Okay, now one of the employees of the Boston Consulting Group, or members of the Boston Consulting Group, was Margaret Spellings. Margaret Spellings used to be the Secretary of Education under George W. Bush. So think No Child Left Behind kind of thing. Our board chairman, Nicholas D'Onofrio, served on the Spellings Commission while she was Secretary of Education. And he was on the Commission on the Future of Higher Education. So now, when he's chairman of the Board of Regents, they hired the Boston Consulting Group for whom she worked. She is now, by the way, just been appointed president of the University of North Carolina system. But we gave over almost $3 million to the Boston Consulting Group. It's not illegal, it's not crooked, it's not corrupt, but it certainly is transferring money between friends.
And we do have a new president of the Board of Regents who is, working on this contract. And he assures us, this is Marco Jakian, who was chief of staff for Malloy, and he assures us that he's not wanting to privatize or corporatize or destroy higher education in Connecticut, and that we're just sort of being hysterical with our rhetoric. But we have yet to see anything different. We see these connections that Kathy just brought up. We see these contract proposals. We just put two and two together, and he has not shown us anything to prove that this is not what's going on. And until it's been proven to us this is not what's going on, we are going to continue being upset about it.
Yeah, there's just been an audit of the Board of Regents too, and the Connecticut Mirror just published an article today about that audit. And of course we haven't seen all the details, but there were some irregularities in the audit. And what bothers us is we're on our fourth system president. We've seen provosts come and go. There's been massive turnover. We've spent close to $6 million on consultants in the system that I know about. I mean, there may be more that's been spent. The work product that we've seen has tended to be
from the consulting
from the consulting groups that have been paid millions, have been bare bones PowerPoints
that don't make any sense. We just think that the citizens of the state of Connecticut deserve better. For the and 80%, over 80% of students who go to the Connecticut state system stay in Connecticut. I mean, so this is the future of Connecticut.
Now, wow, that's all very disturbing.
Sorry.
But a lot of people, I think I hear all the time that, people assume government is inefficient, the private sector is more efficient. We hear it in the media. I don't buy into it. I feel as though the money is just moving differently. But I did see an article about an action that you took, and I read some of the comments, and some of the comments were, these teachers are, spoiled brats, kind of. And so how do you counter that?
Well, I would counter it in a number of ways. One way is that we have the support of a lot of students. I mean, the students understand that this is about them. It's not about us. We have not talked about money. None of this is about money or even kind of improving work conditions. So students understand perfectly well that it's about the quality of their education. So I don't really think it's about us at this point.
I can certainly understand why somebody might look at a college professor and think, you lead a pretty good life. You because when we talk about, well, we teach 4 courses per semester, people will say, how many hours is that in the classroom, right? Is that like, so it's 12 hours a week in the classroom. If people don't understand that we do more than that, then that seems like a pretty cushy job. And I can also understand that people might think, you don't have to be in at a certain time of day, and then you get summers off, right? So your schedule is your own. Yes, all of these things are great things, right? Except my summers are spent doing research, and I'm not paid for the summer. My research is something I must do in order to keep my job. And when I publish a scholarly article, I'm not paid for that. I have to do it, but I get no money, absolutely none, for any scholarly article. When I review other people's books for university presses, I might get a $100 gift certificate in books.
Maybe.
Or something. But we don't get we do a lot of work that's not compensated because it's part of what's expected of us as sort of public servants and in the intellectual community. Many of us spent many years in graduate school getting the expertise that we have. And I will say that, as public university employees, we are not paid the same as private university employees. I think right now, I think my salary is fair. But I think if there aren't raises that come from time to time, you will not be competitive, right? People will choose to teach elsewhere, and you will be left with the dregs. And this is particularly important in professional programs like engineering.
And, and if they get rid of tenure, which basically these proposals are doing, nobody would come. No decent faculty member would come and teach here, and a lot of young faculty members are already considering leaving.
No, I mean we have degrees that cost a lot of money. Right?
It took a lot of time.
Took a lot of time.
It took me 10 years.
That are from the top institutions in the world. And we came to Central Connecticut State University because we wanted to work there. I wouldn't want to work there under these conditions, and I would go elsewhere if I had the opportunity. And I think that it would be very sad if students couldn't have faculty who were from excellent programs that, and we see that now. We're able to build programs at CCSU and at the other state universities that are competitive. Really competitive.
So it looks as though if we continue along this direction that seems to be headed, that the divide between the opportunities of first generation working class students and very affluent students is just going to get more and more divided.
Oh, absolutely. We've already got the biggest income equality gap in the country in Connecticut. And I mean, this will just make it worse.
And, in a lot of these reports, so if you read the Commission on the Future of Higher Education's report, they constantly talk about 2 things, diversity and workforce development. Okay? So I assume what they're trying to say is the more diverse you get, the less you get a university education and the more you get trained to go into the workforce. This is more like servitude than...
As opposed to having a real career where you can, do something you really...
Right, where you can reach, where you can imagine yourself as an attorney or a doctor or an accountant or anything. I mean, working at the UN, traveling the world, whatever you want to do. It shouldn't be limited just because you come from a background where your parents didn't make a lot of money.
Well, and in theory, at least, this is the land of upward mobility.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not in practice. Well, if people want to find out more on your website, we do have a slide. Okay, now talk a little bit about Connecticut Higher Ed Matters. You formed a group to fight this.
It's a group of faculty and students and alumni and just people who are concerned about improving public higher education in Connecticut.
And the website will, talk about the issues. It gives you a way to take action. So there's a website tab that says action. You click that, it gives you some things to do.
Maybe you can tell us a couple of things to do.
So one thing I think that's really important is that if you're in, that you email your state legislator or you call them and you say, I want a quality education at the state universities. I don't want you to compromise on this. I think calling the Board of Regents, each regent, and telling them, leaving a phone message or emailing them and saying, don't take away the quality of our universities. Stand up. There are individual regents on that board who should care more about this and should stand up for us.
And the website has links to, it has email addresses, phone numbers. I mean, everything that you could possibly need to contact people is on the website.
Now, are there regents who represent every area of the state, or are they mostly concentrated in the central part?
The old Board of Trustees used to be pretty representative. This Board of Trustees is not particularly representative. But, for example, Richard Balducci is a graduate of CCSU of the history department. He was a secondary ed teacher. He was also Speaker of the House in the General Assembly. And I think, so there are people with CCSU connections or with any CSU connection, but fewer than there should be. And that's part of the problem. They don't really know the system as much.
So really, it's up to the public,
to
students
educate.
at any of the systems or families to educate them.
Yes.
I'm thinking, here we are, in New London area, and a lot of the students in New London high schools are not from affluent families, and the schools are becoming more ambitious, and there is more of a drive to get students into colleges, get them through colleges, and what possibilities will they have? We've heard about student debt loads.
Yeah.
And the state system is still relatively a good deal. I mean, even though tuition is going up, it's still quite a good deal. But to get the students through college, you do need that personal interaction with faculty members, because our students have issues other students don't. Most of them work full-time, they've got family issues, and you just stick them in front of a computer and they are not going to be able to do that. And they've done plenty of studies that only certain types of students do well with online education. They're the self-motivated students who really know why they're there, but students who are have certain problems, they just need that classroom experience.
Yeah, and I can't believe that you get as good an education by working at a computer and essentially teaching yourself as you do from a
No, and I think of a lot of people who have jobs and have family obligations think an online class means, I can just squeeze this in any time, and you really do have to get away from the distractions of all the rest of your life. Well, we have 2 more minutes, so maybe tell people again what they can do if they're inspired, or what they should be learning about here.
Well, first of all, you can go to the ConnecticutHigherEd.org website and you can read about the particular issues. Now, if you're really interested and you want to go further, you can actually just Google CSU AAUP and go to the AAUP website, and you can actually see what the Board of Regents has proposed.
And we have the proposals all on the website.
Right. And on any of those websites, you can find who to contact. It's really great if you can contact your legislator. Even better if you can contact the Board of Regents, because they need to hear what the public wants. And they need to hear that taxpayers, because one of the things they always say is, we're dealing with taxpayers here. As if what taxpayers don't want is to pay faculty salaries. But taxpayers do want to pay for consultants and the Boston Consulting Group, right? The taxpayers of Connecticut need to say, we want it invested in faculty, we want it invested
In the classroom.
in the classroom.
Student services, you know.
Right.
So yes, we want to invest it in a way that will get more return on the investment than
Right.
throwing it out there.
Right.
Well, thank you to
Thanks.
both of you for coming down the long drive down from
It's
New
our privilege.
Britain, and let us know, keep us posted
Okay.
about how it all goes. Next week, Peter Goslin is going to be our guest, and he's going to talk about everyday realities for immigrants and refugees. I guess it'll be another myth versus reality show. So we will see you then, and thank you again to Louise and Kathy.
That was great. Thanks.
Can you get that one?
I can get this one.
Every sun rising, it brings another day. Ever realizing I'm the one who went away. If I could, I truly would come running back to you. Had enough of traveling, but what else can I do? Try to keep on driving down the lone highway. Always I'm arriving, you know I never stay. Villages and farms and cities bash by in my mind. Wondering and wondering just what I hope to find. I hate to see that silver moon go down. Riding all night just to get me to another town. Yeah, but I hate to see the moon go down. Every day I have to pray I don't jump in a river and drown. Try to keep 'em moving even in the pouring rain. I can't win for losing, life is just a broke down train. Pushing down the memories that pull me back to you. Sometimes it's more than I can do. I hate to see that silver moon go down. Riding all night just to get me to another town. Yeah, but I can't abide the light of day. I used to see the black and white, now it's only shades of gray. Standing at a crossroads, can't decide what to do. I wanna turn the car around and head on back to you. But I had to leave it all behind. I put my foot on the accelerator, driving just to kill some time. I hate to see that silver moon go down. Riding all night just to get me to another town. Yeah, but I had to leave it all behind. I turn on the radio, singing just to keep from crying. I turn on the radio, singing just